At this point, you might think that using the macro recorder is pretty straightforward, but there is another level of nuance that I need to bring to your attention there. So we're going to set the stage by creating a macro that will be a simple macro. It's just going to type a couple lines of text. I want to show you that even with such a simple macro, things can still inadvertently go sideways if we're not aware of all the nuances involved in creating the macro. So this particular macro, I do a lot of consulting projects, and so I always try to include my contact information in those projects. And so a macro that I might create from time to time would be one to just simply drop in that tagline on those spreadsheets. So to begin our macro, we're going to click on cell A1. Part of why I'm going to put my cursor in cell A1 is I don't want to be motivated to inadvertently move the cursor. Because let's say my cursor was in some random spot, and then reflexively I go back and I click on cell A1. If I made that reflexive move while the macro recorder is running, then I'm tying that macro to always putting this text into cell A1. I don't want to limit to cell A1. I want to put the text anywhere I happen to be. So to save me from myself, I often will start a macro in the corner there so that I don't fall back on old habits of then going and clicking on the corner and then basing from there for the rest of the macro. So step 2 shows that we can click that record macro command. If that shortcut doesn't appear, the alternative is to go to the view menu, choose macros, and then record macro. This one we're going to call contact info. We're going to store it in the personal macro workbook because it's pretty universal. We're going to say it types out the contact info tagline. We'll click OK. Type a couple lines of text, and then we will optionally use keyboard shortcuts. We'll do Control B, we'll do Control I, Control U. And so when I'm recording, I can carry out steps in any fashion that I normally would. So if I like using keyboard shortcuts in my macros, Excel will translate those to programming code. If I prefer to do it the long way by actually going and clicking on commands, it's all just the same to Excel. I'll end up with the same lines of programming code either way. So once I have optimized things, and also if you are recording a macro and you make a mistake, just simply undo the mistake and Excel will remove that line from the code there. Once we're done, we can click Stop Recording, and we'll try playing back the macro, and that's when the nuance that I'm kind of holding in abeyance will then reveal itself. So my cursor is in cell A1. So to start recording my macro, I'll use the shortcut down at the bottom. Again, if that shortcut is not available to you, the alternative is to go to the View menu, go to the Macros command, and then choose Record Macro. So there's that Use Relative References setting right below that. We're going to get some experience with that in a moment, but we're going to first see what happens when we don't pay attention to that. We're going to click Record Macro. We'll call this Contact Info. We're going to store it in a Personal Macro Workbook. Notice I'm not typing in a keyboard shortcut, and one reason to not type in a keyboard shortcut yet, this particular macro that I'm creating, I'm going to reach a point where I'm going to realize I'm going to record it over again. And I won't be able to record it over again if I go ahead and jump the gun and assign the keyboard shortcut. So leave that space blank until you know that the macro is perfected to your liking. Then that's when we add the keyboard shortcut at the end. So we'll call this Types Out Contact Info Tagline. We'll click OK. So here then we'll just type in some text. And then we can go back up. We can select these cells. I can press Control B to make them bold. That saves me from having to activate the home menu. I can press Control I, or I can click the italics command. I can press Control U to underline it. And so once I'm happy with how things look, I can then choose to stop the recording. So now what we're going to do is we're going to click on any cell. And in fact, when we're testing our macro, I want to encourage you to kind of start on a blank worksheet. Because one, we're going to find that macros do the work really fast. And so sometimes it's hard to tell that anything actually changed, particularly if it's typing over the data that's already there. So that's why I want to start in a blank space here.